Hello, everyone. It is December 14th, 2021. It's Tuesday. It's Harp Tuesday. Welcome to this week's episode. So today I'm going to do an in-depth look at this beautiful Chaconne by Handel from his Suite in D minor, HWV 448. And this is a piece that I arranged for Lever Harp. It's part of my book, Transcriptions for Lever Harp. And I also did a Harpists in the Wild video on this. And as I was looking back last year at the various Harp Tuesday episodes I've done, I realized I want to do more of these in-depth looks at pieces. And also that some of the music that I've played for Harpists in the Wild is a good candidate because I already have a music video then to point you towards and say, hey, you can listen to this piece, here's how it sounds, here's how I play it, here's how I hear it, rather than having to also try to record something as part of a Harp Tuesday episode. So you should be seeing a link up here to go listen to it. It's a beautiful piece of music. Great recording during the last autumn as the leaves were falling down. And then today I'm going to just talk you through it. So it's a chaconne, which basically is a theme in variations. We get this beautiful 8-bar theme. And then we get 5 variations, each of those also being 8 bars in length. And the sort of the harmonic progression, the chord progression, stays the same basically for all of those 8-bar sections. So when we look at this theme, to me, I hear it as being somewhat free and kind of exploratory. We're just kind of discovering this sound, and there's a certain freedom to the pulse that it's not, we can push and pull this a little bit. And then when we start the variations, it becomes a much more regular and rhythmic and steady pulse. So this just that hint of, say, being on the top of a hill, a little bit of inertia to start rolling down. You're some big rolling stone or something. A little bit of inertia to start rolling down, and then you get to the bottom and you lose some momentum as well because everything has there's no longer any downward momentum. So pushing forward a little bit and then pulling back. And we might, basically there's 8 bars, but there's kind of a 2-bar phrase and a 2-bar phrase and a 2-bar phrase and a 2-bar phrase. And each of those might have a little bit of that, not too much so that it becomes too predictable. But just playing around with that idea of a little bit of freedom with the rhythm. The second of each 2-bar phrase is always a repeated chord. So for example, and in general, I think, for me at least, I hear that second one is being a bit of an echo, a bit softer. So if we started at mezzo forte, that second one then is maybe mezzo piano. Or you just think a little diminuendo, right? A little bit of a decrescendo that we get this. Sorry. Try that one more time. You notice there what happened was I went dum, dum. I actually placed a tiny bit early, and that had the effect of making that first chord, it stops it a little bit early, the sound, and it's kind of an interesting effect. You could play around with that, right? Of a dum, dum, of a little bit of separation between those 2 chords. But in any case, trying to do something with that second one, I think, and in general, if you're not sure, just maybe playing a little bit softer is great. So the or even not even softer, but the first one maybe has that sense still of some momentum, and the second one has a sense of relaxed and not necessarily going anywhere. I want to talk about this 5th bar and the fingering that I'm using there. So I deliberately, when I did this arrangement, I didn't put any fingering that bar because you absolutely could just go 1, 2, off, 1, 2, off, 1, 2, 1, 2 on all of these chords. That sounds great, right? That works great. The fingering that I've chosen to use, and I'm doing it for the sound, not necessarily for any other reason, but just because I like the sound of it, is I'm actually placing all 4 of these notes. So 1, 3, 2, 4. And then after playing that first chord, before playing the 2, 4, I put 1 and 3 right back on. And then before playing 1 and 3, I put 2 on. I can't put 1 because 1 is already on the string. So it has, and then that'll come off. So 1, 3, replace 2, 4, put 2 on the A, 1, 3. And I think I generally maybe come down with 2, 3 on that next chord, but again, you could come down with 1, 2, doesn't really matter. This fingering allows you to not have any risk of buzzing because you always have these placed. Everything's placed before you play the next chord, rather than worrying about the thumb having to avoid the B, or the second finger having to avoid the F. But as I say, that's not really the reason I'm doing it. I'm doing it because it also means we're placing maybe a little bit earlier than we might place if we're doing this. And it gives it a bit more of a dry, semi-staccato sound, and I like that in that particular passage. So just to throw that out there. In the second bar, I have this little muffle suggestion, and that's only because I was a little bit worried about this first chord, this D minor, as we go to change the F sharp in the second bar, whether we might hear that F still ring. That's going to depend on the speed you play it. The faster you play it, the more likely it'll still be ringing. It'll also depend on your harp, how resonant that is, how loud you play it, how the levers tend to sound as you change them. But if it's a problem, you can just reach the third finger, fourth finger, second finger down with the right hand, stop that as you change the lever. And finally, let's talk about this trill in bar 7. Now, I was working from piano music of the original, but I was only able to find one edition, and it didn't fill me with great confidence that the ornamentation in it was actually from the original, or maybe something some editor had added at some later point. So this trill here is something you could do, but don't feel that it's definitively something that Handel would have put in, or something that you need to do. And typically in this period, we get a repeat, right? So what might happen is the first time through would be unadorned, no ornamentation, and then the second time through, you might have or something. There'd be lots of opportunity to maybe add ornaments that second time through. So for me at this point, all I'm doing is that the first time through I don't play the trill, and the second time through I will play that little trill. And in terms of playing it, I'm actually, instead of starting on the F, because with the trill it means we're playing the E and the F, I'm actually playing the chord and then starting the F, E, F, E a little bit later. To me, that sounds good to me, but anyway, you could play around with that. And of course, being where you do have some time, it's quite a squashed bar visually, but we still have the same 3 beats that we have in some of these other bars. So that 1 and 2, 3 and 1, that there's quite some time for that trill, and we can take a little bit of time extra if we need it. So then we get the first of these variations, and as I say, I hear this being, so maybe the very beginning, maybe the very beginning Again, that idea of a little bit of inertia to overcome, that we don't just jump right in, and it helps our ear kind of catch up to, oh, now we're hearing steady eighth notes, but that this pulse becomes quite regular. And with this, in this variation, when it's a beautiful variation, so much fun to play, and it sounds beautiful, but there's a lot of visual demand. Of course, as we're learning it, we want to look at the music, we want to look at the right hand, we want to look at the left hand because they're quite a ways apart, and also at the levers. So ideally we would have 4 separately controlled eyes for all of this, which unfortunately we don't. So you certainly could approach it by just working on the right hand without any lever changes, even though that's the wrong note. Oh, can't help it, sorry. If that felt as if the only way you could approach that, but I think I wouldn't want to do that for very long at all, because you don't want to train your ear to hear it the wrong way. But what you can do is leave out the left hand notes and just do the lever changes, right? And being aware that we're often finding these sort of 4-note chord position shapes, right? Here's a D minor second inversion. Here's a root position A chord. Back to that D major this time, second inversion. Sort of a G minor throughout this root position shape. So just being aware of those chord shapes can be helpful. And then as it gets going with the left hand playing the note and bouncing up and playing a note and bouncing up and back, it's kind of the left hand gets to dance a little bit. Boom, 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 boom. It's really quite delightful. It's really quite fun. Yeah, so a beautiful variation. Love that variation. Oh, and let me just mention that this bar 10, I guess it is, second bar of this variation, this A is correct as printed, as far as I know. In the Harpist in the Wild episode, I played, I believe, a C sharp there, which again is part of the right chord, but it's not the written note, so it would have been this. Rather than... And actually, maybe I played that C sharp just now as well, I'm not sure. But anyway, that A is correct, just so you know. So then we get variation 2. Now, variation 2, I couldn't figure out a way to get us back to the lever settings we needed at the end. So if we're on pedal harp, for example, we would do a repeat, just like all the other variations. And I think this is short enough, and the variations are short enough that it's nice to hear them again. It's nice to do the repeat. But in this case, we're only going to do it through once, just because we can't get back to the correct lever settings. So we have the right hand doing a bunch of stuff. Now we got the left hand doing a bunch of stuff. And here again, in this variation, you might practice maybe just the left hand, maybe the right hand here. Oh, sorry. Practicing going to that D, which is the start of the next variation. So to just get that left hand, because the left hand's got the hard job here. I'm suggesting a little lower on the strings, and that's just the idea that by being a little bit lower, it helps bring out that left hand anytime we're trying to provide some clarity to the left hand. Being a little bit lower on the strings can be quite helpful. But you can experiment with how low and whether or not at all you want to do that. For me, it's these last couple, the bar 6 and 7 of this variation. I guess, I don't know what it is in the, 19, 20, 21, 22, 22 and 23. Oops. I'll try to circle that. The left hand starts to get a little bit... So 1, 3 to make this stretch happen. 1, 2, not 3 this time. But this time 1, 3 because we're going to go 3, 2, 1. Oh, and now it's 1, 2. And now 2, so we can go 3, 2. So just the uncertainty, is it going to 3? Is it going to 2? So definitely, again, potentially a great one to practice just the left hand. Let's talk about bar 19. So in order to get these lever changes, these notes, which are the tune, this running pattern of eighth notes, are being taken in the right hand. So even though the stems are down for them, it's just kind of double voiced to show that that is part of the tune, but because it's in the upper staff, it's the right hand doing that. So left hand is going to change both the C and the F down. You should be able to hook them both and change them both at the same time. And the right hand, and let me erase these so we can see the notes just a little bit better. The right hand is going to try to find that first chord. And so this is what I found most comfortable for my hand, was to find this first chord, a 1-5-10 shape, right back to that plus the third finger. So reach that third finger out to touch the fourth finger, find that same chord again, plus the third finger on E, play it. So a nice little raise, wrist motion. Rather than, for example, trying to have the finger independence to do that and then place again. It's just such a big stretch that felt more awkward than doing this. If this, again, it's a big stretch here. If this is too awkward, if you're able to do this, but this is too awkward, you could, of course, go maybe chord, 4, chord, or chord, 3, chord, if you don't want to place that third finger along with 4-2-1. It's an awkward spot. If it just ends up feeling impossible, the rest of the piece is okay, you could leave out this variation. It works perfectly to go from variation 1. So to go right from here, dum, 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 oops, and where's my pencil? Right from here, whoop, over to the next page, and start variation 3. Yeah, but anyway, try that fingering, see if it works. So then we get variation 3, another one of my favorites. This is just so gorgeous. This must be down, I think. Something like that. So again, you can see the left hand bouncing around quite a bit. And again, one to practice maybe right hand plus the left hand lever changes. I'll just, again, gorgeous variation. I'll just talk about the right hand. So here we get these 4 notes placed out of order. So even though we're going to play 4 and that, normally if we have 4 and 3 on the string, we'd always play 3 next. But we're going to go 4, 2, 3, 1. And this is the type of pattern where that does make sense and it does feel nice and avoids any risk of buzzing. Later on, we get a slightly less standard. Let's look at this one because it's not across the bar line. 4, 2, 3. So I'm not suggesting to place, in other words, I'm not saying place the thumb here. I'm just saying follow the bracket as it says, place all of 4, 2, 3 before playing 4, 2, and then, and if we wanted to, I didn't put a ton of brackets in to try to keep it not too messy, but if we wanted to add them, it would be 4, 2, and then place 3, 2, 1. We'll slide. So it ends up working out quite nicely, I think. But again, I mean, of course, you could change it. It's not super fast, but I think it works nicely. And just this, that sort of dum dum pum pum pum, that lightness to those little 16th notes, dum dum pum 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 pum, that it let it sort of dance along. I think it's such a gorgeous variation. This note in parentheses, this G, that's simply because it's a very awkward or fast lever change because, let's actually get rid of all this here for the moment. Because this C right here is natural, right? And so we can't change this too early because we don't want to change it before we play that C, and we also would prefer not to hear it get changed, so we don't want to change it right after. But we don't have too long before the left hand has to jump down and try and play that G. So, so that I missed it, right? So I think about changing it and throwing the hand right down to that G, but you could absolutely just leave that G out if you wanted, and it would be fine. Variation 4. So now at this point, it's kind of, you can breathe a sigh of relief in one sense because there are no more lever changes, which is really quite nice. These last two variations have no lever changes. Variation 4. Yeah, beautiful. Again, all these great variations. And I just want to mention that I actually changed my mind on this right hand fingering. So I have 3, 2, 2. And again, it's part of the left hand melody, the lower melody, lower voicing. But because it's in the upper staff, the right hand staff, it's being played by the right hand. So these are right hand notes. So I changed my mind, and I'm actually fingering this with 4, 3, and of course off because we're repeating 2. So that we get, and instead of normally when we're playing 4, 3 and 2 is not playing, would be down here. Here you can actually get it kind of up and ready. And that to me was, I was happiest with that, of getting that ba-ba-bum, because that nice crisp sound. With these staccato left hand notes, I'm just ever so slightly, kind of like a piano, right? Just a small little push, a small little close and bounce right back. To get that staccato effect. And you certainly wouldn't have to. Or and again, this would have probably been written for harpsichord, which all of it is kind of staccato in a sense, but you wouldn't necessarily have that distinction between the two types of sound. But I quite like it, and that's what I'm doing there on those. It's maybe worth talking just a little bit about the rhythm, because I found sometimes working with students that this variation feels a little bit peculiar. So we're in 3/4, but in this case I think it's easier if we count all of the eighth notes. So that means there's 6 eighth notes per bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? So if we go back to that, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's the rhythm. With a little trill, in this case I do it both times through on both iterations. And I'm just doing, because it's kind of fast, I'm just doing a D, E, D. Again, certainly if this were Bach, I would be starting on the E, but I just really prefer the sound of this rather than, but again, you should play around with that. Some combination of D's and E's. You could leave it out entirely, and of course you could start on the E instead of on the D. In the left hand, I'm placing these first 4 and then coming off. So that, first 3, sorry. This big stretch. Even though I'm going right back, it's too big a stretch for me to feel comfortable. I'd rather come off. And I am starting, of course, on the beat with a trill, with this little ornament. Great, and then variation 5. So again, the original had 10 variations. Variation 5, I think, was variation 4, and variation 4 here was variation 5, or something similar. But I think actually as Handel went on, the variations became very kind of cookie cutter, paint by numbers, and not as interesting as some of these beautiful earlier variations. And this, what I found by putting this particular variation last, is it has the possibility of suddenly picking up the speed quite a bit and making it a really great ending variation. So we could keep whatever tempo we've had. But if we instead go, it makes a great ending. And similar to the second variation, it's this little bit here, sort of the fifth and sixth bar of the variation, that suddenly the right hand has been consistently just going, we find a shape 3 times, 3 times, 3, 3, 3, 2 changes. Gotta remember to go 1, 2, 3. And then we repeat. And the second time through, instead of doing the first ending, where did that go to? We do the second ending. So. And I definitely took some liberties with that ending, right? That's not what Handel wrote. He would have just written the same as the first ending. But I wanted something that kind of gave it a solid finish. And again, I feel it's not too out of place for the time. And one of the advantages, of course, with digital music is you can zoom in. You can kind of see here by the stems that my intention is to play the first 3 with the left hand. So 4, 2, 1, left hand. Then the right hand plays these with 4, 3, 2, 1, right hand. And then the left hand will play the last 2 with 1 and 2. So 4, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1. You could, of course, go 4, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. So both hands play the same shape here. That might make more sense. Means the right thumb has to move down a little bit lower, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, but to do this little rolled arpeggio chord at the end to make a nice ending. So hopefully that has given you some food for thought in terms of this piece. I would also encourage you to check out some Handel on your own, right? He wrote quite a bit of music for keyboard. And unlike Bach, of course they share the same birth year, but Bach tends to use a lot of modulation, a lot of accidentals, whereas Handel doesn't do it all as much. So he's a good candidate, his music is a good candidate for adapting it to Lever harp, for example, or harp in general. Yeah, so to go check out some of these harpsichord works and see whether there's something there that you could adapt for harp as well. And yeah, hope you've enjoyed this. I will see you in 2 weeks' time. Cheers.